Hi, I'm Sara.
And I'm Rena, and welcome to
Biopic, a podcast story. This is a podcast where we dissect the good, bad, ugly, and absurd of this specific genre of motion picture, the biopic. If you want to learn more about us, our scoring system, and how we choose movies, please check out our special introductory episode, Introduction, Who Are We and What Are We Doing?
Sara, what movie are we doing this week?
This week, we will be talking about The Agony and the Ecstasy, starring Charlton Heston as Michelangelo. And we are super excited to welcome our guest stars this week, Fry and Bry from Pontifacts.
Hello.
Yes,
Thanks for having us.
You're welcome. We are so excited that you agreed to come on our fledgling podcast.
Can you tell our listeners a little bit about your podcast and also what inspired you to start a podcast about popes?
Fry, do you want to start? Tell about our podcast, or do you want me to do it?
So we started this because Brie really likes medieval history. Renaissance history. We do it in the style of Rex Factor, where we talk about a pope and then we rate the pope and then we go on to the next pope.
We are a papal history podcast ranking all of the popes from Peter to Francis, and as Fry says, we do one pope an episode where we cover their life story and then rank them based on our very objective and very serious categories, like what their face looked like and how scandalous they were. As for what inspired it, Fry is correct that I like Renaissance history. I have a degree specializing in the Renaissance and Medici Florence. So what we're going to be talking about today is right up my alley. And yeah, when you look at the Renaissance period, there is one through line in terms of power and making things happen, and that's the popes. And so considering there is a 2,000-year unbroken line of papal rulers, there was lots of material to cover.
I am so stoked and so flattered that the two of you agreed to do our podcast. Pontifacts has over 1 million downloads. It's been around for over 6 years, and I've been listening to you guys since the pandemic. So having you guys on the show was a hashtag goals thing that I thought maybe in like 5 years or so, they'll think we're a big enough deal to do this. I am also amazed and owe you an apology that you sat through the Agony and the Ecstasy for us.
I've seen parts of this film before. It was very weird. Like, I've seen huge chunks of it, just not the whole thing altogether.
Which is not a bad way to do it. If you're going to watch it, chunks is a good answer.
Just take out all the boring bits.
And I'm also excited to give Pontifacts fans a preview of the corrupt Renaissance popes, because I'm sure that everyone is always asking, when are you going to get to the Borgias? When are you going to get to Julius II?
All the time.
I personally am so excited to know that the Benedict IX episode that I have been waiting 5 years for is finally coming out. For people who don't know, Benedict IX was Pope 3 times, so super corrupt, and I can't believe that episode's finally coming out.
Yes, part 1 is actually dropping tomorrow, so There's still bits that Fry doesn't know that we're not ahead fully in the recording for, but she gets to know about part 1 dropping all the first bits of his incredible, bizarre lore.
And we have a question that we ask all of our guests. It's kind of a hybrid question here, but would love to hear from you. So is there a biopic that you love? And if there isn't, is there a biopic you wish would get made?
Yeah, I'm not usually one to watch biopics. I've seen the rare one here and there. Like, I definitely, somehow ended up watching the Johnny Cash one. So, I wouldn't consider anything to be, something someone I would want to see, because it's not usually a genre I go for.
I do have a list of ones I'd like to see, or ones that have been sort of done, and I'd like to see them done better would be something like And none of these answers are going to surprise anyone, because first off, Sylvester II. I would love to absolutely see a biopic of a pope who went to study with the Arabs and learned math and science and astronomy and physics and all these things before they were even acceptable in the church, and then came back and got this lore about being a necromancer and making deals with the devil. I'd love to see that. And then, of course, because I am entirely biased, I really, really want a good, accurate biopic of Lorenzo de' Medici, the Magnificent, and Cosimo de' Medici, the first Grand Duke of Tuscany, because those are my guys. And I would give anything for a good, accurate Medici biopic.
Rena, do you want to give us the trigger warning?
I sure can. This movie contains depictions of horrible bosses, corruption within religious institutions, non-virginal Renaissance popes failing to meet the behavioral lifestyle standards that modern popes and clergy are expected to follow, wooden acting, low workplace safety standards, scaffolding-related angst, dubious 16th century medical practices, queer erasure, boring and chemistry-free romantic interests, large objects falling, the Catholic Church, warfare, a future spokesperson for the National Rifle Association, and a starring performance by a man who may have murdered a romantic partner and was married 6 times despite not being Henry VIII. Brie, Fry, Sarah, can you think of anything that I may have left out?
That is a remarkably complete trigger warning this week.
It really was.
Rena, can you give us the spoiler warning?
Spoiler warning. We are going to spoil everything, including possibly the major plot points in works of narrative art having absolutely nothing to do with this particular movie. Consider yourself warned.
Sources used in this episode include, for me, the internet. And Rena, I think you have more that you looked at.
Yes. So I basically skimmed some sections of Michelangelo and the Pope's Ceiling by Ross King. I've spent thousands of hours wandering around the Metropolitan Museum of Art and other museums. I took some art history classes in college, but this week we have actual experts on the show who have like far more collective knowledge than I can accumulate and got us out of doing our homework, sort of.
Excellent. Ta-da!
Bree, can you please give us a roughly 360-second rundown on Pope Julius II and then tell us a bit about his working relationship with Michelangelo?
I can. Don't time this. I'm going to do my best. Pope Julius II, born as Giuliano della Rovere, was pope from 1503 to 1513, and very justifiably can be called one of the most influential popes of the Renaissance/early modern era. And he's most famous for a couple of things. First, for being the greatest rival of another famous Renaissance pope, Pope Alexander VI, known as the Borgia Pope. As a cardinal, Della Rovere aggressively condemned everything that Pope Alexander VI did, up to the point of officially damning his memory when he became Pope Julius, despite the fact that he was essentially equally as guilty of nearly everything that he condemned Alexander for, including having illegitimate children whom he placed in significant political roles for the church. His daughter Felice served as an important diplomat and negotiator and basically ran a swanky papal retreat for decades. He was known to be difficult, forceful, rough, abrasive, and argumentative. Second, he is most famously known for being the warrior pope for his role in the Italian wars, quite literally leading armies into battle to expel foreign leaders from Italy and put important Italian families back in charge of the city-states. Which, of course, we should note, he did not do to be benevolent, but to ensure that he was at the center of this new, stronger Italy with the Church and the Papal States. During this time, he also founded the Swiss Guard, which are the Pope's private bodyguard forces, which still exist to this day. And finally, and most obviously for what we're going to discuss today, Pope Julius II is famous for beginning the Vatican museums following his uncle, Pope Sixtus IV, who started the Vatican Library, and more importantly and more upsettingly, the demolition and reconstruction of St. Peter's Basilica, often called New St. Peter's on our podcast. And in doing so, he became a prominent patron of a handful of the most famous artists of the Renaissance, including Raphael, Bramante, and of course, Michelangelo, specifically for the painting of the ceiling of his Sistine Chapel. Now, as for the working relationship between Michelangelo and Pope Julius II, it's important that we establish that by the time Pope Julius gives Michelangelo his first papal commission, Michelangelo is already exceptionally famous and celebrated as a sculptor, primarily for the extensive work he'd done for the Medici family in Florence. And perhaps most notably, in the modern sense, for the piece of work he'd done against the Medici family, which is the Statue of David, which was done for the Republic of Florence after the expulsion of the Medici family. So this is to say that Michelangelo, beyond already having a reputation for genius and talent, also had a reputation for being difficult, butting heads with people, even people he'd been exceptionally close to. But don't worry, because after Pope Julius, Michelangelo will go right back to producing more work for the Medici, who, incidentally, will take the papacy next. So he's already a difficult person, and so is Pope Julius. But this does not stop Julius from commissioning Michelangelo to start working on his tomb in 1505, a project that is going to take him over 40 years to complete, due to the Pope regularly refusing to pay him because, he needs those funds for his battles and more. So they're already not in the most best professional space when the Pope decides that this sculptor needs to be the one to paint the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel. And that's where the movie starts.
So can you tell me a little bit about Julius's family, the Della Roveres? I assumed that he came from a big family, and I was surprised to read that he'd been a fisherman when he was young.
Yes, he was. So his family, the Della Roveres, have some nobility associated with them. We know that his uncle was Pope Sixtus IV, so there is some legacy in the church, but his personal branch of the family was sort of too minor for that to matter, at least until Pope Sixtus made him a cardinal. That's when things start to change.
Sarah, can you tell us about the movie The Agony and the Ecstasy?
So a little bit about this movie from our friends at Wikipedia. The Agony and the Ecstasy is a 1965 American historical drama film. It is directed by Carol Reed and stars Charlton Heston as Michelangelo and Rex Harrison as Pope Julius II. This film was partly based on Irving Stone's 1961 biographical novel of the same name and deals with the conflicts of Michelangelo and Pope Julius during the 1508 to 1512 painting of the Sistine Chapel ceiling. It is also has a score that is done by Alex North, who we last heard in Spartacus. The film was shot in Todd AO and CinemaScope versions and features a curious intermission. And the Todd AO version was used for the DVD release because Todd AO is a higher quality. And I've seen this movie described as a failure, but it was a $7 million movie. It made $8 million at the box office. So it at least cleared its budget. I mean, it's a failure for a lot of reasons, but it did not earn less than it cost to make it.
I have a bone to pick here about how the Hays Code screwed over generations of Americans by making it impossible to portray life as it really was, and by giving us a misleading portrait of what life was like before the late 1960s. This is relevant to The Agony and the Ecstasy in the queer erasure, in the dishonest portrayal of Michelangelo as heterosexual, if unenthusiastic about all sex.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's kind of like a cartoon character. Like, they just kind of imply that he has no genitalia, but maybe like a paintbrush down there. or a sculpting hammer. What is really interesting about this is we're 4 years away from Midnight Cowboy, from Women in Love, The Boys in the Band, Myra Brackenridge, like just to name a few of the movies that we are 4 to 5 years away from, where homosexuality was implicitly or explicitly explored. So we're like standing on the precipice of that era, but also I would add that a movie that really did reshape filmmaking, Bonnie and Clyde, which would come out in 1967, couldn't, bring itself to explicitly say that Clyde Barrow was either gay or bi-curious. This shift happened and it all happened at once. This feels like a final relic of a different time.
It's an interesting perspective too, because I wonder, given who Michelangelo is to the world, whether that would have been explored even a couple of years later. I feel like that's still something is when we talk about the Renaissance geniuses, because this is something we could talk about with almost all of them. We could talk about Botticelli, we could talk about Da Vinci, we could talk about just about everyone in that space. Raphael, all of them have some of this implication about them, and there are people that are still so hesitant to talk about because we sort of unambiguously refer to them as geniuses and heroes and people that made the world, and that seems to make people very uncomfortable still.
Yes, you make a good call out there, and it's very different genius that I'm about to mention. But when we were exploring Gandhi in our Gandhi episode, he was just like the most sort of like sexless creature on the planet, which wasn't true. There was nothing deviant about him, but he did do it sometimes. And the movie kind of like makes it out almost like even that is too puerile to consider when talking about his life.
They want to idealize him. There's a line in the movie, there is no blood in his body, it is only paint. Or you have to idealize these figures as superhuman or subhuman, depending on how you want to look at it, but just like separate from the rest of us.
We open with the most exciting 15 minutes of a industrial film style art history lecture. I have to apologize up top because I give every movie we watch so much shit if it doesn't show artistic process. Like I just like rail on it. I'm like, they just make it look like someone just went out and did something. And it makes me crazy. I am not going to complain about that again because watching this movie, like we're literally watching paint dry.
I'm going to nerd out and say like anytime somebody's going to show me a Renaissance sculpture and talk about it for 5 minutes, I'm there. So I didn't hate it, but I think it really sets the tone about teaching. This whole movie is about to teach you something. You're not going to go in and have an experience. You're going to be spoken at, not spoken to.
Yeah, we get a slideshow of what I believe is every sculpture Michelangelo ever made.
There's a couple missing, but pretty close. It's a fairly extensive history.
There were some I hadn't heard of, and I guess I enjoyed getting a review of them. It's just not something I expect in a movie, and I was wondering, like, were audiences in 1965 really so attentive that they thought, yes, this is a good way to start a major motion picture?
When Fry started watching it, I until she said, "Oh, what is this at the beginning?" I just assumed it was my copy.
Yeah, it was a bold choice to start with a 15-minute lecture.
But look, they put it there to basically proselytize and preach and very condescend to you.
Yeah. So they finish there's some beautiful shots of Rome, and we see some people in what I would call Ren Fair army gear running around in the Italian hills, except it's not Ren Fair, it's the Renaissance.
And that scene is so long. It takes them forever to climb a hill.
Like, what is happening too? It's just like all of a sudden we're in a field and people are running at each other, and like even the oxen look unhappy to be there. Like, I'm like, is there a war? Is there a battle? You give me 15 minutes of art school 101, and then you just drop me into this movie where two sets of people are fighting. I have no idea why.
Brie, why are they fighting?
So I want to give some context here to what's going on. This is coming back to Julius's whole idea about kicking out the external powers from Italy. So at the time that he becomes Pope, most of the ruling families that we think of when we think of Renaissance Italy, like Medici, Sforza, they've all been kicked out of their cities or forced out for a number of different reasons. And we have all these major regions like Milan and Naples and Florence controlled by the French or the Spanish. And now the Austrians, which is, our Holy Roman Emperor situation, they want to come in and take a piece for themselves. And so we have most of Italy being ruled by non-Italians, for one. Then we have the areas that are still being ruled by Italians, like Venice, posing a threat to the Papal States as well. So Julius is looking at this and he's going, I don't have control of any of these people because they run their own kingdoms elsewhere. Venice is a threat to me, and the Papal States are very piecemeal. They're kind of broken up. A lot of it has been sort of eked away over the last couple of centuries. So he doesn't want any of that. He wants Italy to be in the hands of the Italians. He often uses phrases like expel the barbarians and liberate Italy. But more important than that, of course, is that he wants the church to be at the center, and he wants the Papal States, which is fractured, to be reclaimed, reunified, re-centralized, and top dog. So this is what he's going into battle for, and from what we can tell, context in this movie, these are when he is fighting with the French. So getting them out of Milan, getting them out of Florence, these are the battles we're talking about. Retaking Bologna is a big one.
I have to say, if you're going to open with a battle, you should set it in extremely tall grass after making the stakes of that battle completely indecipherable because you failed to establish anything. You should do that. And I was a little furious about this, a little bit like A2 Carol Reed, who in his time made some extraordinary movies, including The Third Man, which is probably one of the best movies ever made. And one of the things that is most impressive about his work is, and in that film in particular, is that he gives you so much spatial atmosphere and awareness right from the jump. And he does so in a really concise way, but it's quick. And you're in Vienna and you're understanding that that's, that the city has been divided up into 4 quadrants post-war, and the stakes are laid out. And there's a chase in the sewers in that movie that you can follow, even though they're sewers, and sewers all kind of look the same. And tons of cinematography around Vienna that really captures the chaos and uncertainty of post-war Europe. And he gets you right into that world instantly. And that doesn't happen here. He was kind of on the decline of his career at this point. He would only make a couple more movies. He did make the musical Oliver in 1968, which won a ton of Academy Awards and is one of the most deceptively grim musicals. He was definitely struggling a bit in his career here, but every scene, including from this fight scene, I'm like, I have no idea where I am or any context around anything that's happening or why it's happening this way.
And it takes so long to get to Rome to figure out that that's where you actually are. It's just a hill for 10 minutes.
You mentioned here that Rex Harrison, who is a monster, should be growing a beard in this movie.
The fact that someone is portraying Pope Julius II was the first pope in ages to have a beard, and the last pope for ages to have a beard is so offensive because he specifically had a beard to separate himself from all of the licentious Renaissance popes, and it's not even there. Of all things, he needs to have a beard.
Yeah, there's a very famous Raphael portrait of him looking pensive in 3/4 view with the beard. And I was like, okay, no one's making Henry Higgins grow a beard.
It's not happening.
So just a note here on Rex Harrison. I refer to him as alleged murderer and confirmed monster, Rex Harrison. One of his 6 wives unalived herself in grief over their relationship ending. And also a lady friend that he was cheating on one of his 6 wives with, Carol Landis, was either murdered by him or unalived herself while he callously sat downstairs and waited for her to die. I talked at length about him on our Cleopatra episode, but he is, like, in short, a racist, actively alcoholic monster throughout his entire career. And I don't even think he's that great of an actor.
Unfortunately, that does put him right in line for what you would expect for popes of the era. Not to make light of it, but it's right on brand.
So we meet Michelangelo where he is chiseling at a big old block of marble.
Is it marble or is it plaster of Paris?
It is plaster of Paris pretending to be marble.
Casting Charlton Heston in this role, he's so brutally miscast in this movie, although he does carry off the unlikability really nicely. I feel like it's like if we cast Ryan Reynolds as Michelangelo today.
Oh, that's a choice.
And this is a character who should have, like, the one thing we know about Michelangelo for sure as a person was this was a very emotional man. Like, I want to see somebody fly off the handle in this role.
Yeah, and he just kind of is like, there's like a pissy bitch drama queen about it, but it's a very, like, toxically masculine one.
Yeah, it's more like a tantrum rather than, like, passion.
Yeah.
So Michelangelo thinks that he is going to make a tomb for Pope Julius II, and people repeatedly show off their third grade math skills by pointing out, you planned 40 sculptures for this tomb, but it took you 4 years to carve the David. So this is going to take 160 years. Like, they're all so proud that they know how to multiply. I'm sorry, even if they're doing it with Roman numerals, that's not very impressive. And I wanted to call out here that I guess I've seen different numbers on exactly how long it took to carve the David, but Michelangelo almost certainly had other projects going on at the same time.
Yes.
It was not a thing where he showed up 5 days a week, 8 hours a day, and only carved the David for 4 years. And not, so I can call that out as inaccurate, but then I reflected on, can I make an argument that he would have finished this 40 sculpture tomb? And I don't know that. Like, would some have been smaller than the David? Would he probably have had assistants doing, like, some of the gross big chunks of marble thing? So I can't prove, yes, he would have finished it, but I can prove their idea of it takes him 4 years to make a sculpture is off.
Well, it would have taken a very long time, especially given, like, supply and materials and those kind of pieces. But it is definitely understood that when a master is working on a project, he has tons and tons of apprentices working with him. So the 40 sculptures that he had planned for the tomb, he does eventually finish the tomb, or at least the Moses piece that they're talking about in this movie, 40 years later, but it does get finished. So, yes, lots of other people helping. Definitely not something you show up 9 to 5 for, although this is a man who would have absolutely worked himself to death if he could have. And it happens over a massive, massive span of time. But a lot of his projects were finished a lot quicker than that. It should also be pointed out that sculpture is very different from painting as well. So what those skills looked like would have been different. And the environment in which you're sculpting marble would mean that sometimes you have to let it sit for a couple months if it's too cold, it's too hot, it's too humid, or any of those things that could potentially damage the stone that you're working with. So yeah, there are these long gaps where he would go and do something else. There were horses, there were other sculptures that had to be done.
Also, am I incorrect in assuming that the place that they're talking about putting the tomb in St. Peter's is where the Bernini altar stands now?
It could be, but they wouldn't have been that far in the construction enough to have had that. No, okay. They did absolutely want to put it in St. Peter's. It does not end up in St. Peter's. It ends up in San Pietro in Vincoli, I think, which was the Della Rovere Cathedral. Bernini comes on a little bit later after Julius, so they're not that far in construction. They were still knocking stuff down.
Okay, so oh my gosh, this thing was like so dull that it's all like jumbling up in my head now. So the Julius, we see him yelling at a bunch of clergy. He talks to Bramante. They talk about the church, and he calls Michelangelo in to say, I want you to paint this ceiling. And Michelangelo says, I'm not a painter. And Julius makes some points about times that he painted where it sounds like Julius is reading from a 20th century art history textbook. And no, Michelangelo is stuck painting this thing.
So I'm guessing if you were told to do something by a pope in this era, you did it. Period.
Well, Michelangelo did indeed fight with that a bit, but when Julius says you'll do this or you'll hang, he's not kidding. That's definitely something that could have happened. It would have been absolutely demonstrably scandalous, and Florence would have had something to say about it. But yeah, when the Pope says you're going to do something, this commission is an order. It's not like something you can refuse.
Yeah. So Michelangelo starts painting the 12 apostles, and he doesn't like his work. He goes to a party where he meets the youngest daughter of the Medici family in just the most contrived case of we need some form of female eye candy in here, please. And I do not believe anything between them. I was just like cringing at all their dialogue. There is the cardinal that he's talking to supposed to be Leo X?
Yes.
Okay. So we get that over with. And she's based on a real person, but...
Contessina? Yes.
Yes.
She is a real person.
But, I mean, IRL, this would not have happened because of, I think, class issues, and he likes beefcake. Male beefcake.
This is the most hastily inserted, boring, unbelievable romance, like, that we could see, like, until Gangs of New York. Like, it's like, please don't, why is this here? Like, take it out. I don't care.
I couldn't even clock it as a romance, honestly. Every single time they were on screen together, they would talk and talk and talk, and it wasn't, I've seen less romantic things be more romantic.
I want to talk about that class issue thing for a second, though, because they inevitably knew each other. In that is historically accurate. They would have known each other. The class issues, it's sort of a bit different and a little bit more malleable for the Medici family in particular, because they had such a close relationship with the artists that their family patronized, that they would have, to some level, at some point, been very familial with each other. So that relationship would have been more like, I don't know, adopted brother and sister rather than romantic, but they would have known each other. They would have been able to have those connections. We know that Lorenzo himself had a similar relationship with Botticelli, and that Ghirlandaio, who was Michelangelo's master in painting, also had a very similar relationship with the family.
There's a whole thing about he is going to go to Turkey to make a bridge. I don't think he would have liked Turkey any more than Rome. The Sultan at the time is, I think, Bayezid II, who is the son of the guy who took Constantinople and the grandfather of the guy on Magnificent Century, which I like to watch while I'm washing dishes. And the only phrase I know in Turkish is "gebem," which I believe means I'm pregnant, because I like to watch a Turkish soap opera set in the harem of Suleiman the Magnificent.
Amazing. It's also really important to note here that would have been a choice by Michelangelo specifically to piss off Julius, because Julius, this whole time, he's fighting the Italian War, so he doesn't have time for this. All that man wants to do is call a crusade on the Ottomans. So he specifically wants to go to crusade against Bayezid II. So when Michelangelo is like, I'm going to Constantinople to build a bridge, it is quite literally the most fuck you moment, right? He's slapping him in the face in a very direct way.
Well, would they have said Turkey or would they have said the Ottomans?
But yeah, it would have been Constantinople and the Ottomans.
Yeah, and I don't think he would have liked it there. I think he would have been sad about Hagia Sophia being a mosque and not.
Yeah, for sure. It is an interesting because for so long, even 200 years prior to this, there was still a relationship between the patriarchs over in Constantinople and the popes, even though we were in the schism, the Great Schism of 1054. They still communicated, and they would have had some of that translation of artists and ideas and whatnot. But yeah, right now we are in peak drive out the Saracens mode, so he knows exactly what he's doing to Julius by saying that. And Julius dies before he can call his crusade, so it's all very snipped and pointed on purpose.
So, Bramante shows up. Bramante has a whole thing about constantly trying to undermine Michelangelo in this. How close to life is that?
Yes, that would have been something that there was a lot of competition between the two, and generally the patrons would foster that sort of competition between the two artists when they were working on a similar project. The one thing that's less accurate about this that I want to point out is that they also, throughout the movie, sort of suggest that Raphael is going to take over from Michelangelo if he keeps being difficult, and that at one point when Michelangelo leaves, which we'll get to, that Raphael is granted the commission instead. That did not happen. That is not a thing that happened. Raphael would never have done that. He took so much inspiration from Michelangelo. So the only time he was ever in the Sistine Chapel during Michelangelo's work was to look at it and be inspired himself, and which he commented on quite thoroughly. He was not a part of that snippy competition back and back. Bramante, yeah, absolutely. They were at cross purposes.
I also wanted to note that at this party that he's at, and the caption said Renaissance with a musical note next to it. Yeah. And you see this again when Michelangelo goes to this bar where everyone's dancing around to Tarantella music.
They are the best.
So the bar owner, Michelangelo says the wine is sour. The bar owner is like, I just opened this cask 10 minutes ago. And then he finds that, yes, his wine is sour. So there's a free-for-all with all of these 16th century Ren Fair simpletons. It's not the Ren Fair. They're in the Renaissance. Michelangelo goes back to the Sistine Chapel, where he's just been a total asshole to his assistants about what shade of red paint they're mixing, and he scratches the things and just puts a lot of work into messing it up, and then goes to work in a quarry voluntarily, where it seems like he makes friends with people who cover for him so that he can hide from Julius.
They're so subtle.
A sense of place would be incredibly helpful, because first it goes on forever when Julius comes up on them eventually. Their method of tracking him down is basically riding around and asking people, have you seen Michelangelo? Is it you? Is it you? And they don't even have a drawing of him. I'm surprised it worked.
They're yelling, go to the mountains to a man in front of these guards. And it's like, oh, I wonder what that's about.
He was indicating wildly, and I was like, don't they see him? He's on a rich boy art walkabout where he's going to go learn from the real people.
It's a weird place for them to have put this. They obviously wanted the drama of him destroying the Sistine Chapel and then going away, but that happened before he even started the chapel. That was when he was like, Julius is not paying me for the tomb, I'm out of here. So it was only when they dragged him back and gave him the Sistine Chapel after that. So for me, I'm going, what was the point of this? It just felt really out of place. It was just for that little bit of extra tantrum drama.
And so then he runs away, and he looks up in the sky, and sees an animated vision of the finger of God touching the hand of man.
Maybe, is this how it happened? I don't know. We're in a cave. We're literally like troglodyting it here.
Who's to say how any of it happens? But again, I apologize for every time I have demanded to see process because I don't care.
I mean, we know that Heston had a thing for, Jesus movies. And we know that this is coming out right around the same time as the Ten Commandments. This feels very like calling out to Constantine seeing the Cairo in the sky and deciding to convert the entire empire to Christianity. Like, it feels like, would Heston do a movie if there wasn't a divine intervention moment?
He does love to stand on top of a mountain and yell.
Yes.
And so he's like, okay, I got it. I've got the vision. And then we have an intermission. It's the weirdest choice because this is a 2-hour-long movie.
Well, also, nothing has happened so far. Why are you putting an intermission when nothing happened? There has been no action. There's not anything like, here is Act 1, here is Act 2, let's have a break. We've seen older movies with intermissions. Beckett had one, and before their intermission, stuff had happened. Spartacus had one, and before that intermission, stuff had happened. So I see the black screen, and I was like, what? Huh?
The tantrum of him throwing paint on the apostles is like the biggest action moment of the whole film.
Maybe that rock. That slab of rock. I did say to a bunch of people that with how long films are getting now, that I wish they would re-put intermissions in. Like, if I have to sit through a 3-hour and 20-minute movie, I want an intermission.
I don't want a 3-hour and 20-minute movie, period.
And I wasn't complaining about it because I didn't want to watch this movie anymore.
I was mad that it wasn't exactly halfway. Or, like, it was off by a bit. And it felt bad.
Yeah, and it was like art history lecture, 40%, like 35% of the movie, then the intermission. So this would be a good time for 2 questions. Brie, if you could elaborate on what is up with a pope leading armies.
Well, and this is something I do want to comment on, because even though Julius gets all the credit for being the warrior pope, blah, 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 this is not something that is exclusive to him. We do already, like in our podcast, have a handful of popes who have either organized armies or led troops into battle. And I have a list for you. We have Pope Leo I, Gregory I, Leo IV, John VIII, John X, and Benedict VIII, just on our show so far, and soon to come Pope Leo IX. So this is not something that is just about them. This is sort of the manifestation of what happens when the Pope becomes a temporal office, which we've had since the creation of the Papal States in particular, right? Like with Charlemagne, the donation of Charlemagne, making the actual country that the Pope is in charge of, we have to have him leading an army. Julius does it on a different level than everyone else, but he's not the only one, and there are several who will have to deal with that even after him. Notably, Pope Clement VII is going to have to contend with the sack of Rome in only 14 years after Julius dies. And even though that doesn't go well for Rome, especially doesn't go well for the Swiss Guards, the Pope does survive it and does essentially make military decisions. So, this is still something that happens, and ironically, just for context, as much as Julius is looking to unify Italy as much as he can with his battles, our last sort of military pope in the 19th century is Pope Pius IX, and he will be actively militarily resisting the Italian unification in an attempt to defend the existence of the Papal States, which doesn't work, and they cease to exist at that point.
Thank you. Sarah, I think this is a good time for you to talk about Charlton Heston's politics.
Yeah, this is just a fun little aside about Charlton Heston's politics, which I think everyone knows at the end of his life were trash. He had a really a sad journey of politics where he was a super Democrat and liberal from the start of his career up until 1972. He marched on Washington side by side with Sidney Poitier and MLK. He made this movie called El Cid, and when it came out in 1961, he actually marched in protests outside of theaters in Alabama that were segregating the audiences, and marched and did sit-ins at diners in Alabama where they were engaging in segregation. He endorsed LBJ. He was vocally pro-gun control after the assassination of RFK, asking for better gun control laws. But this is where it gets a little messy, is he later said that his transformation started when he saw a billboard for Goldwater in the 64 campaign. And Goldwater was a monstrous, terrible human being. And his slogan was, "In your heart, you know he's right." And he said he saw that and he was all, son of a bitch, he is right. But he maintained liberal politics up until Nixon's election. And then we all know what happened. Nixon, then Reagan, so he started his own PAC and got involved in the NRA and became their president and spokesman from 1998 to 2003. I think we've all seen the scene in Michael Moore's Bowling for Columbine where he confronts him, and people felt like Michael Moore went too far in that confrontation at the time, but I think we know now he went way too easy on the NRA. He notably was very angry about Ice-T's song Cop Killer, because even though he hates gun control, what he really hates is the refusal to bow to authority. And he also resigned from Actors' Equity over the controversy around Jonathan Pryce's casting in the Broadway musical Miss Saigon. In the role he had played in London as the engineer, he was going to come over and do it in America, and it eventually all worked out that he did. But Actors' Equity was, for a while, refusing to allow a white actor to play a character who is Eurasian in the Broadway show. And he said that was, quote, obscenely racist, that they wouldn't allow him to play that part. I would say this is very much a typical boomer trajectory, but he was born in 1923, so I can't blame it on that. But
yeah, we can still go back and look and see where the lead poisoning started.
Yes, precisely. It's a huge bummer. He was also president of Actors' Equity for several years too, in the late 60s to early 70s, and he used to clash with Ed Asner, who was a much more liberal person. So there's my story about Charlton Heston.
Wild.
So how do you think they did at making his nose look broken in this?
They did okay.
So, fun fact, if you've ever been to Westminster Abbey, the tomb sculptures of Henry VIII's mom, dad, and grandma were made by the guy who broke Michelangelo's nose.
Torgiano. Yes.
Yes.
Remember when we were talking about artist competition? That's that moment.
So we come back from intermission, which is leading us to the interminable second half of this film.
Did we come back from intermission, or do we have to listen to a 3-minute song first?
Yes, there is 3 minutes of score.
I thought they did a good job showing what the earlier Sistine Chapel would have looked like, that there were already these gorgeous frescoes by Botticelli and Ghirlandaio from the previous generation. And I guess the 3 or so times that I've been there, you have to take it all in. And I want to go there sometime and focus on those a little bit. And also that they wouldn't have the Raphael tapestries up yet because he hasn't designed them. And there's no Victoria and Albert for the drawings. But they also show that it originally had the ceiling was blue with gold stars on it.
I always give something credit when I could see that it was made before the 1600s, where they actually show the blue background and gold stars. So it gets a little bit of a point for me there.
So we are back from intermission. And what happens, Sarah?
Rex Harrison catches up with him and he announces that he's had a vision and now he knows what to do and he's going to head back and paint. We spend a little bit of time with this movie finding out that the Pope is essentially Amanda Palmer, allowing him to work for free for the honor of painting it. I noted that here as he's like, I haven't been paid in 6 months. And I was like, have you thought about the honor of doing this work for him for free though? Because that is also a payment according to some artists.
Oh, did Michelangelo have we know he had assistants on the Sistine Chapel,
yes.
right?
Mm-hmm. Lots.
Yeah. Because they make some big deal about dismissing assistants. And then there's also the matter of the scaffolding that Bramante wants to put the scaffolding up that will leave holes in the ceiling. Was that real?
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. And then this would have been an ongoing thing, too, because Julius, again, is fighting wars. So they would have constantly been told that we don't have any money for that. Figure it out. We don't have any money for that. Figure it out. I haven't paid you, but you need to pay me for staying in my property because I've got soldiers to feed.
Yeah. Michelangelo unfolds this 12 by 6 foot parchment drawing of the design in the middle of the battlefield. And everyone's like, Pope, you have to go kill people now. And Rex Harrison is like, hold on, I'm looking at this. So Michelangelo has just made a lot more work for himself on a job he doesn't even want.
Essentially.
We go into one of many gloriously lengthy montages here, watching him paint. Just watching him lay back and just to music. And I like these montages because they aren't the other parts of the movie. I'm just going to be frank here. This movie shouldn't exist. Why do we have this? We are watching someone paint and get into imaginary fights. Yeah, it's such a nothing story. And there's so much yappy, talky about God knows what for God knows why. And I just don't care. I want it to end.
I have some commentary on that I'll keep for ranking, but I have strong feelings about what this could have been and what it would be if they made it now. Because there is a lot of story here. There is a lot you can do with what's going on. It's just that you've chosen people who are not emoting. You're choosing to portray it in this way where the dialogue is so stiff and there's no emotion behind it. And they're not talking about this conflict in a way that matters. All we hear over and over again is, when will you finish? When I am done. When will you finish? When I am done. They're not engaging in what that would have actually looked like for these people who had massive egos, massive passions, and massive views for things that mattered to them, like God and majesty and the Christian world and the inspiration for the Christian world. There's so much there that they just go, no. How about we make it boring? How about we focus on the fact that he's really tired?
Yeah, and we learned that Michelangelo has skipped the dinner party being thrown by Contessina, and so instead of all the wonderful things you just talked about, Brie, we get more of the most Blandy McBlanderson tacked on chemistry-free romance since the Culpeper subplot in The Private Life of Henry VIII.
And he says, there's no room in me for love. So I was like, so you're gay or you're Patrick Bateman? That's the best we can do here.
Both of which arguments have been applied to Michelangelo throughout history and historiography.
He finishes some of it and a bunch of cardinals get all worked up because they're people who are naked in the art. And I don't want to cast blame here, but he had a whole bunch of statues I saw at the beginning of this movie that were almost all stark naked. They hired him for this job. They should know what was up.
Why didn't you put clothes on these person who only makes naked people?
And honestly, this was my favorite part because this was the first time we see Michelangelo talking about humanism and talking about what that meant for art and talking about all of the things he would have learned while working for the Medici, which is this idea of the glory of the nakedness, the sensuality in the masculinity, and all of these things that the humanists were celebrating at this time. And this is massive. And we do he gets his opportunity when the next Pope comes in, because Pope Leo X is all about all of that. But he really, like, this is the only time we see him talk about anything with passion, and he talks directly about how the people who should be the most celebratory about these moments in Genesis, which is like the whole beginning of their religion and the glory of their God, they are the biggest hypocrites between it, and that the truth of what he's painting is what separates Christianity from paganism and all of these things that he firmly believed in. And it's the only time we get to see that little bit of emotion.
Yeah, this was a vibrant conversation piece where it was like, oh, that's what the art is. And then we see that he's so tired that we spend several minutes wondering if he's going to be able to climb down a ladder, which ultimately he is not. He does collapse to the floor, and we see a rock bottom scene pretty much every other movie, and I didn't anticipate one being in this movie, but here we are. It's rock bottom.
If I have quadruple vision, I'm going to just sleep on the scaffolding.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Tie yourself on.
Yeah, the candle kind of blurs in front of his eyes. He drops a paintbrush. He drops another thing. And you see him falling through from these levels of scaffolding, which somehow gives him, is this supposed to be pneumonia?
I looked it up. Apparently it did give him like weird double vision, and it did not resolve until several months after he was done painting.
Yes, because of the pressure on these nerves here from doing this all the time. So that was the thing, definitely. He did. There's quite a lot of reporting about the absolute physical toll that painting this way took on his body. So, yeah.
Because I was just like, this seems overdramatic. What are we doing here? And it was like, oh, he was actually sick.
Well, if you've ever had a cervicogenic migraine and had your vision go whoomp, it was that, but like for 12 hours a day. Yeah.
So we go back to the workshop where Contessina is playing Florence Nightingale, and she sends away the primitive Pope doctors who are bleeding him and says, we use the Moorish methods, which is, I think, meant to be a signal to audiences that they know better than to bleed. But I have questions about this.
Might be able to contextualize a little bit of it. Okay, so one thing that we do need to keep in mind with the Medici family in particular, which would be Contessina's family, is there was a lot of connection with the Moors. I don't know how we want to say this in a nice way, but there certainly were Moorish slaves in the family that may have born children for certain Medici men. Alessandro Medici is considered a mixed race person and whatnot. So there was a lot of exposure to those cultures. And at the time, given that we know that Arabic medicine was in contact with Christianity from about the year 1000 onwards, they would have been the people who would explore that. Is there any direct evidence that the Medici were practicing Moorish medicine as opposed to Eurocentric medicine at this time? Not really, but if there was a family or an exposure point in which that would have happened, they would have been a good one, because they did have direct contact with those cultures, with those ideas in their family.
I'm not going to defend bleeding people like, lots of people survive being bled for hundreds of years. What's she doing? Yeah, I'm not going to do that.
No, it's clearly in the same way that when I said that they wouldn't have portrayed Michelangelo as homosexual, even if the movie standards were there to do that, is sort of this. It feels like the nod that the filmmakers want to make to be like, look, here's our elevated people, right? Like, it's very clearly signaling that the Medici is supposed to come out on top on this film. Yeah.
And Rex Harrison is all going to have Raphael finish the job, which we've already determined was not true. The girlfriend talks him out of that, and he tries to fire him again. And we do this like 16 times, maybe, in the back half of this film. Like, he's going to get fired. I'll be done when I'm finished. And Rex Harrison is looking at him like he's one of his 6 wives. And my question was, and I think we kind of covered this. I had a note in here asking if Michelangelo was this insufferable. And I think you confirmed that he was.
Yes. And more so. There's some things to come back to about this, but Michelangelo was next level petty. While he was doing all of this, because it does get to a point where he's deep in the process and he knows Julius is not going to fire him. Julius is committed to seeing this project out. Julius wants to see what it looks like at the end. And Michelangelo's painting insults into the paintings as he goes. So, like, he's next level petty. He is next level insufferable. Absolutely.
Such an artist. We find out that the Pope has been wounded in battle. They put like a weird little fence around his midsection. He seems to have been cut in half pretty bad, to quote Dewey Cox, but it's unclear what his injuries are exactly.
Well, in terms of the warrior popes, at this point, I wanted to give a shout out to Julius Exclusus e Coeli. I do not know if I'm pronouncing the Latin correctly, and there aren't any Romans here to tell me anything. It still crackles after 500 years. It's an essay written in play format where Julius turns up at the gates of heaven with an army made up of people he sold indulgences to, and St. Peter tells him, "You're not getting in here."
I love papal satire that comes later. There's so many good. So a lot of this comes out of the Protestant Reformation, right? And they become so inspired to make so many of these little satirical moments about the popes. And there's like Antichrist Pope plays and all this.
Yeah, Erasmus has been noted as someone who might have written it, but he never owned it, which is understandable. You wouldn't. You'd get excommunicated and lots worse. And at the end of this thing, Peter tells Julius, "You're not getting in here," and Julius announces that he's going to invade heaven. And I love the approach of this thing, and I think there's something like universal about it in the way that institutions degrade over time.
So did this actually happen? Did Julius get injured at any point?
Well, not in a life-threatening or dramatic sort of way like that. Pope Julius, because they make this like the whole, oh, now he's dying. He's on his deathbed. All of that. Pope Julius died of a fever. He was an old and decrepit man.
Sarah, you observed their outfits look pretty silly. I don't understand why nobody figured out that you should, like, dress to blend in with the surroundings, bro, until so recently.
Well, yeah, that's another thing. You're not going to kit out a whole army in, like, noble finery.
Yeah, they're all wearing those, like, blue and yellow, like poofy hats.
Well, okay, the Swiss Guards still wear those, and they were designed in the time of Julius II and Leo X. So that there was an actual standard of military regalia for that, because if you've seen the Swiss Guard outfits, they are full-on court jester, and I love them. But you wouldn't have sent your regular soldiers in that. We're talking about the era of sumptuary laws, where it was actually illegal to wear things that were fancier than your station. So they weren't going to waste that on soldiers.
And so 17 minutes to the end of this movie, we have a scene that I actually thought was really compelling and kind of taps into what we were talking about earlier when he gets very passionate about his art, where he and Julius start talking about what, the vision and why it is the way it is. And, and Julius is explaining his perspective on Adam and, that he's a sinner and he doesn't deserve to look so beautiful. And Michelangelo is explaining, look, this was a miracle. This is what gives us faith, is that a loving God made him real and made all of this. And I actually thought this was just like a super compelling scene. And I was like, where were you anytime before right now?
This is what I mean. Give me that humanist movie.
Yeah. I'm not saying I want like a whole movie of him and Rex Harrison talking, because I hate them both. But like, it was so interesting, and I was like, this is very thought-provoking. It really elevated the movie for me. But then we have another dramatic sequence of someone climbing down a ladder.
Yes. It doesn't last long, unfortunately.
And Julius is about to die again. And Michelangelo goes to his bedside and pisses him off about the ceiling again. And he rises up ready to live another day because he wants to see that ceiling.
Which he does. Julius does survive to the end of the completion of the Sistine Chapel, only for about 4 months, and then he does die. And it takes Michelangelo another 30-something years to do his tomb.
And I felt like when they would show walls of St. Peter's going up, it seemed like they were getting it done pretty fast. But I know the Romans have some kind of an expression about it was the making of St. Peter's and that it took over 100 years.
Yes. I mean, different segments of it, and it was reworked several times throughout the process and whatnot. Pope Leo X spent all the money, so they had to put a lot of that on hold for a very long time. So it does work in stages.
But yeah, ceiling's done, ceiling's gorgeous.
This scene also caused me a little bit of giggle because we see the whole ceiling and it's glorious. But what's also humorous about this scene is it seems like everyone who's in that church is all of a sudden like, oh, hey, shit, there's something cool up there. And I'm like, was there not a moment sooner where you saw the ceiling?
What's happening this whole time?
Throughout the whole movie,
Yeah,
they're still doing mass.
They saw it going up, and they all got paint dropped on them, and they all had things fall on them.
Well, we can assume that because Pope Julius was dying at the end of the movie, maybe these were all the new cardinals showing up for the next conclave.
I like this theory.
So wait, what can you tell us? What were they thinking when they elected Julius at the conclave?
Well, there's a lot of conversation about why Julius was elected. He was actually, his election was very well funded, ironically, from kingdoms that he would later go on to join leagues against, like France. So there was a lot of thought that he would have been sort of, because he was so like brusque and so like strongly minded, they felt that he would probably be a better fit for the leadership because they just ratified the Treaty of Tordesillas, which has to do with how they divided the rest of the world up for evangelism and colonialism and all of that, right? So missionaries, where we're sending missionaries. So they thought, hey, this guy's really fighty, he's really pushy, he's going to back us up while we go out and Christianize the rest of the world. And if he's fighty and he wants a good king, well, the Holy Roman Emperor thought it would be a great idea to have him on board and then get crowned as Holy Roman Emperor and have all this extra power. So there was a lot of, here's a man who's really interested in the secular things, so he would be good for us, is sort of the vibe that was going. And fair enough, that was the whole period, right? If we look at Leo, no one thought Leo was going to say anything about theology and doctrine. So it's very much a temporally minded moment.
And are we done with this movie?
Yeah.
Just as abrupt ends. Oh,
Sarah, I believe we have some awards talk.
Tiny bit of awards talk. This movie was nominated for 5 Academy Awards, all in the technical categories: Best Art Direction, Cinematography, Costume Design, Original Score, and Best Sound. Interesting, just side note, is this was the era when they were still giving color versus black and white awards for art direction and cinematography and costume design. So this was in the color category. It was nominated for 2 Golden Globes, Rex Harrison, and Best Screenplay. Okay. It did win 2 awards from the National Board of Review. It was considered one of that year's 10 best movies. And Harry Andrews, who played Bramante, was actually chosen by the National Board of Review as Best Supporting Actor that year.
and then the movie was never seen again.
Yeah, and there were a lot of really great films that came out in 1965. Sarah, can you please give our listeners a quick refresher on how we score movies?
Yes, we rate movies on a 1 to 10 scale across 10 areas that we find to be subjectively and or objectively important to most films, but specially tailored to biopics. If you want more details on how we score movies, please scroll down our webpage at biopicapodcaststory.podbean.com. You'll also find a record of our scores for past episodes. And with that out of the way, let's score this thing.
So I guess we're starting with outward appearance, and I'll just give that like a flat 5. There's nothing special, nothing bad. Acting, casting, I'm going to give it like a 3. These men. So passage of time, 5. I don't know. Costuming, another 5. Like, it's just, there's nothing special. Quality of script, I'm going to also give a 5, just because. Is that what I wrote? Where am I? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Nope, I gave it a 3. So quality of script, I gave a 3. It really felt like I don't know, like a high school play, unless like a film, right? Like, we've clomped into the scene. Now we're going to talk, and now we're going to clomp out. Accuracy, I've given a 4. It's there. We got some stuff. Not everything's great. Not everything's perfect. Storytelling, it was so cliched, even at the end with the revelations. I gave it a 2. Production value, a 6, because like, they're doing it. It's in color, fancy. And then the decision-making production is a 4. Like I said, a high school play. And so I was with the dog, but so I missed this part. But I was with I went to like a 4 profit art college, and at our art history class, they showed us the first 15 minutes of this movie, the documentary, to be like, ooh, now you've learned something. But haha, for-profit art college, not great to begin with.
So you'd already seen that opener before. Did you know that you were going to see it again someday?
No, I didn't know where it came from. I sent Brie a very shocked message, like, why the fuck have I seen this already? Yes.
Oh my god, that's amazing. So outward appearances, 3. Acting and casting, 3. Passage of time, 5. Costuming, 4. Quality of the script, 4. Accuracy, 2. Storytelling, 3. Production value, 6, mostly for the Sistine Chapel. Production, direction, decision making, 3. And do we care, 3. And my total came to 3.6.
Brie?
Outward appearances, makeup and hair, 5. Acting and casting, 4. Could be better. Passage of time, 5. Generic high Middle Ages Renaissance. Costuming, 3, mostly because of what Contessina was wearing, which drive me crazy. Quality of the script, 3. Accuracy, 4. Most of the things that weren't accurate weren't things I would quibble over, except for the large part of Michelangelo's personality that they didn't even give him. Storytelling, 2. Production value, 6. Again, Sistine Chapel. Production decision-making, 4. And do we care? I put a flat 5 because this movie lives in the realm of my specialty and my passion. And really 2 of them. Renaissance, Medici, and papacy all combined. So I care so much. I care so much. Did I care as a result of this movie? No. And it made me feel sad because this is an era I am excited about and want to yell about all the time. But I'm dying for a remake.
Yes. So I used I'm going to let you know, I used the buy this week, which is a thing where we can add or subtract an entire point from our final average if we feel that what we came to was not reflective of the experience of watching this movie. So for outward appearances, hair, and makeup, I gave it a 3 because I was annoyed at Rex Harrison for not growing a beard. Acting and casting, I gave it a 3. Passage of time, I gave it a 4. Costuming, I gave it a 9. I love a costume drama. I love big dresses. I love like big floaty skirts and regalia and stuff. And quality of the script, I gave it a 2. Accuracy, I gave it a 2. Storytelling, I gave it a 3. Production value, I gave it a 9. I really appreciated what they did with recreating the old Sistine Chapel. Production, direction, decision making, I gave it a 5, which I now feel was too high. And for do we care, I gave it a 1. I did not care about these versions of any of these people that I have much enjoyed reading history books about. So my average came to a 4.1. But with the buy, that's a 3.1, which is more reflective of whether this was enjoyable or not. So what was yours, Fry?
3.7.
Sarah?
3.6.
And Bree?
I think mine was also a 3.6.
The average comes to 3.5, which our average comes to 3.5, which means the Agony and the Ecstasy, you earned a second opinion. It's our equivalent of the Papal Bull. You kind of inspired me on that to come up with it. I was like, I'm not going to reward a film for being mediocre, but if it's really good or really bad, and then second opinion came from how did this get made? Because few things make me giggle harder than people reading bad reviews of movies, and they do a thing there, where they read like 10-star reviews of terrible movies and make fun of them.
I love it.
When I logged it on Letterboxd, it said one of the reviews on there was, "When will I finish my review? When it's done."
Perfect.
The prize for scoring, second opinion, is an element that we stole blatantly from How Did This Get Made? The prize for scoring above an 8 or below a 4 is that you get to hear us make fun of IMDb reviewers who disagreed with our assessment of the film. Sarah, can you give us the first one?
Sure. This is a review by Jazz Donkey 77806, written on April 29, 2016. Title: Michelangelo is forced to paint the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel by Pope Julius II against his will. I absolutely love this film. As a performing artist and art enthusiast, I believe this film does a phenomenal job representing the struggle and beauty of creating something. The Agony and the Ecstasy also demonstrates very well how oftentimes we as people have a bittersweet relationship with things we have to do, but want to do well. Michelangelo didn't want to paint the ceiling in this film, but if he was going to, he wanted it to be the best work he could do at the time. This kind of motivation and dedication to your craft is very inspirational to me, and this is my favorite film to watch when I am looking for motivation in my life. I noticed when watching the film, the style in which it is filmed reminded me of the kinds of shots and filters you might see in Ben-Hur or El Cid, which would make sense because this is another remarkable Charlton Heston film. This is definitely a great film, and I would recommend it to anybody. 3 out of 5 IMDb users found this review helpful. The internet people, I don't know.
Fry, would you like to read one?
Sure. All right. This review is by Oz the Great at 42330. I wonder if that's a zip code too. It's from March 16th of 2007. Exquisite film. Hollywood would never make something like this today. Spoiler: The Agony and the Ecstasy is a 1965 film about the painting of the Sistine Chapel and is loosely based on Irving Stone's novel of the same name, starring Charlton Heston as Michelangelo and Rex Harrison as Pope Julius II. The film seems to be historically accurate, with the usual artistic liberties taken, such as Michelangelo not being jailed and beaten for arguing with the Pope, to make it enjoyable to watch. The sets were exquisite. It will never cross your mind that this was made in the 20th century. The attention to detail, such as the Pope's splendor and the peasant's squalor, immerses the viewer in the Renaissance. While the Pope's British accent was at first awkward, it is indicative of Hollywood's tendency to give British accents to Europeans. Heston speaks in a brash American accent, but his performance is grand enough to forgive this. The strained relationship between Julius and Michelangelo creates visible tension throughout the movie. The two bicker and have their differences, but even Michelangelo's sketches lying on the dirt prove so captivating to Julius that he, ignoring the cannons and screams around him during a battle to regain Catholic lands, must study them. At this moment, the two men are sharing a sense of purpose toward the same goal of glorifying God and his creations. They seem like generals planning a battle together. planning a battle other than the one going on around them. The final message was that God inspires people to do important things, even if they don't realize it. Pope Julius thinks he's just a warrior, and Michelangelo thinks himself a mere artist, but centuries later they are remembered for their ambitious actions in creating a wondrous work of art. The ultimate result is an immensely entertaining, realistic, beautiful masterpiece, comparable to the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel itself.
What?
Regaining Catholic lands? I'm sorry, what?
This is baffling. Also, I don't think we mentioned, I don't think they called him Michelangelo. Pope Julius did not call that man Michelangelo once in the entire film. Only other people did.
It's true. It's because for most of his life, he wouldn't have been known as Michelangelo.
What would he have been called?
He had what was his first name? It starts with an S.
Are you telling me that that's not his name?
You're telling us that Michelangelo isn't Michelangelo.
It is his name, but Simone. Simone is the name he would have gone by most of the time. Because he is Michelangelo di Ludovico Buonarroti Simone. So it was Simone that he would have been called more often until, you want to take your biggest and grandest name when you start building a name for yourself.
I'm just dumbfounded that they put this movie on par with the Sistine Chapel itself.
Look, okay, I'm going to out myself here for a minute as, because I am clearly a fan of Renaissance art. Comparatively, the Sistine Chapel to me is always a little underwhelming. So in that sense, maybe it can be a controversial stance, but that's the only way it lines up for me.
When something's built up to you that big, it's hard to see it with fresh eyes the first time.
It always is portrayed in a way that makes it seem so much bigger in film and everything, but it's quite a small space.
A classic movie of epic proportions written by Jaybird 1 on December 20th of 2003. 10 stars out of 10. When this movie was released, I was in my early 20s, and for whatever reason, I did not view it until today, December 21st, 2003. This film is a classic of epic proportions and has the support of stellar performances by two of the all-time best actors, Charlton Heston and Rex Harrison. Last winter, I had the opportunity to tour the Vatican, and the Sistine Chapel was included. My appreciation for the artistry and talent of Michelangelo has increased as a result of these experiences. Since I purchased this movie on VHS, I will be able to enjoy the talent of the artists responsible for this film as often as I wish, and two people found it helpful.
What back alley did this guy get a VHS tape from in the year of our Lord 2023?
No, he said 2003.
Oh,
2003, and he would have been 58, so it makes a little more sense.
Yes, that does.
But also, it's very much that meme where the old lady is on the walker and the woman's next to her, and it's like, okay, grandma.
All right.
Speaking of back alley reviews, this one seems to be right on that line. This one is titled Homosexuality Not Mentioned in Book by Roberto De Leonis on December 3rd, 2008. Actually, the book mentions at least one sexual encounter Michelangelo had with a prostitute, which put him at risk of contracting an STD. Irving Stone was later quoted by someone as saying that, in all of his research, he never found any proof that the artist was homosexual. Some people pan Heston's portrayal of Michelangelo. I do not. In my opinion, he put aside his own personality and let the sculptor/painters take over, something that the ancient Greeks called possession. Michelangelo struggled, as many great artists, both with capturing and portraying a vision as with their own insatisfaction and their contemporaries. And Heston's depiction of the artist is, in my opinion, a triumph. 2 out of 7 found this helpful.
Did Ted Cruz write that?
He might have. So, okay, to be fair, there was that whole scene where they're looking for him and they go into a brothel and the woman was like, he came here once, but lol, he's never coming here again.
That was a weird scene because I was like, what is even the point of this? Besides demonstrating how inefficient you were in looking for people.
That was the scene that they put in to satisfy the fact that there was commentary about his sexuality. That's as far as they were going to go.
Yeah, there's a blink when you'll miss it moment when he is with Contessina in his artist's hovel where he gestures at a sketch of a naked man and says, not that, and basically says that art is his banging. Okay. Was there anything else you wanted to tell us about Pope Julius II, Bray?
I still think the most interesting thing about Pope Julius II is his daughter. And he did her, even though he put her in positions of power, he also did her extremely dirty in his lifetime. Mainly because he knew he was as guilty as the Borgias of having illegitimate children and spoiling them. So I think it's important to note that when she got married, he refused to have her wedding in the papal palace and refused to pay a lot of money for it and basically shunted her completely off. And then when her cousin, I think it was the cousin, got married a year later, he held the most lavish and spectacular wedding for her just to be like, screw you, daughter. So he sucks. That's about it. He is the worst dad.
As the Pope, he's everyone's dad.
I know you mentioned that there were popes who were married and popes who had children before. So
yes.
How did any of those guys rate as Pope dads?
Well, I think probably Alexander VI, the Borgia Pope, would do really well as a Frankish dad because he really did take care of his children and put them into positions of power. Except for Juan, of course. We know what happened to him. But some of the earlier ones, it was just sort of normal. It was before they were in the church, so they got to actually be a normal dad, which is probably the best kind of Pope dad that you want. I will say, just because I think this is one of the most bizarre facts that has come out of our podcast, that there is a later Pope, I think it's Paul III, and he had a son who he let run so rampant and wild that the son's name, Pierluigi, became a verb in Italian, pierluigiare, which meant to, trigger warning, forcefully sodomize somebody. So, bad dad popes? Real bad. Yeah.
So, other stuff that you should watch or read instead, like Michelangelo and the Pope's Ceiling. I like Ross King's art history books. I know it's kind of like a pop middlebrow thing, but it's really enjoyable to me. And also anything by my favorite art history professor, James Beck.
I think if you were frustrated with this movie, you should maybe pick up Irving Stone's book, the one that this is loosely based on, because it is, in my opinion, while still not terribly accurate, it's more enjoyable. It's more intimate in the way that it looks at Michelangelo. It covers a greater expanse of his life, which of course includes his life with the Medici. And the pacing is much better, even though it's 600 pages. So it's worth at least comparing the two.
Sarah?
I would just recommend that people go out and see The Third Man. It's a better Carol Reed movie, better movie, period. Amazing performance by Orson Welles in that movie. And it's a lot more fun to watch.
I've never seen it, so I might have to do that.
It's really good. Fry?
Oh, I don't know anything else. Other than this. Of the movies I've seen this weekend, this one was the worst.
Is there a better movie that you've seen at some point in your life that you think people should watch instead? Like, I don't know, Fargo was pretty good, I've heard.
Oh yeah, Fargo is lovely. I used to be like, my family used to take us up for Thanksgiving to Brainerd, which made Fargo weird.
I have a suggestion. It just came to me. If you want to watch a good movie about the papacy, go watch Conclave. It was actually good.
Oh, Conclave was great. Yeah, that was fun. Yes, let's recommend Conclave.
Okay.
It is also very artistic. There are shots. There are Swiss guards. There are cardinals. The Sistine Chapel is there.
So it is plug time. Fry, Brie, do you have anything you guys want to plug?
Come listen to us on Pontifacts. We are Pontifacts.
Yeah, come to our...
Go ahead.
No, you go.
Oh.
You're doing it. You're in it to win it.
You can find us at pontifacts.podbean.com, and we are at PontifactsPod on all social media platforms that we're using, and pontifactspod@gmail.com if you want to reach out to us and ask more questions. I will always talk about the Renaissance.
Thank you so much for coming
Yes.
on. I can't believe you agreed to do it and gave us so much of your time. This has been a delight.
Thank you so much for having us.
So grateful to have the opportunity to connect with you guys and have you on the show.
Yeah,
been a
and
pleasure.
you're invited back anytime.
Oh, there's plenty of more Pope biopics.
So some fun news from us. Our podcast baby has matured enough for us to launch a Patreon, simply in effort to defray some of the costs associated with bringing our show to you, platform hosting costs, recording costs, research costs. And I want to be clear here that there's only one of us who actually does any research work, and that's Rena. But we do have to occasionally order a book off the internet, and we also sometimes have to pay for our movies, like that time we purchased Tennessee Johnson just a few short months before HBO Max made it available, or this week when we each rented the Agony and the Ecstasy. I mean, just, yeah. There's more to come for our Patreoners, but we are offering shout outs to anyone who chips in for us. And with that, we'd love to thank our very first Patreoner, Gates, who has signed up already. Search Biopic a Podcast Story on Patreon, and we'll link to it in our show notes as well. But thank you, Gates, for coming on board and for supporting our work, such as it is.
Yes, that's $5 a month, and we have it linked to from our Instagram account. We'll link to it in the show notes. And yeah, I'm still annoyed that I paid like 21 something plus shipping for that DVD of Tennessee Johnson, which is truly one of the worst movies ever.
No one should ever see that movie.
Yeah. No. Ben Hecht and Zero Mostel felt that every copy of it should be burned, and it was picketed by the NAACP.
Oh, wow.
Okay. Sarah, can you please take us out?
Sad to do this because I've enjoyed this chat so much, but yes, I will take us out. If you like the show, please leave us a 5-star rating and subscribe to us on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts, and tell a friend, or better yet, plural friends, and share us on social media. We hear it helps. You can also follow us on Threads, Blue Sky, and Instagram, where we have visual aids from our episodes. Our Instagram handle is at Biopic a Podcast Story. So do check us out there, and we'll link to that in our show notes as well. And please check out our webpage at biopicapodcaststory.podbean.com to see the official episode ratings of all the movies we've done so far. Also, please check out our Patreon page. And if you would like to get in touch, you can email us at biopiclistenermailbag@gmail.com.
Tune in next week when we'll be talking about a movie about a major figure in country music, but it's going to be a surprise.
Yes, it's definitely going to be a surprise. And thank you again, Brie and Fry, for coming on the show and joining us. It was such a delight to have you, and we will have you back anytime you want to come back.
Oh, thank you so much for having us.
Thanks for having us, for sure.
Thank you for coming on.
This made the experience of that movie much more pleasurable.
Oh, good.
It's true.
I can't believe you watched that for us.
Always.
Yeah, thank
Wow.
you for watching the movie.
We've watched worse.
Yeah, it's true.
Yes.
Good night to the earnest and the cynical.
Good night, everyone. Thanks so much.
Oh, what a sweet ending.